One of the most influential games of all time is Street Fighter II and its series of iterations that came out over the years. But what is it about this game that made it so influential that we're still talking about it after this many years? Well, in this video, I'm going to talk about why it's such an amazing game with an endless legacy and why it continues to remain a game that's talked about, relived, and played to this day. So back in the early 90s, the two relevant markets for video games were arcades and home consoles. Arcades were able to flourish when compared to home console experiences because of their on-screen graphics. Arcade machines could display more colors, higher resolution, and host better sound when compared to anything that the Super Nintendo or Sega Genesis could produce. In fact, the marketing of the Sega Genesis when first released advertised that you could have the arcade experience at home. This is because kids noticed that there was a difference between arcade games and what we were getting on 8-bit systems. When the Genesis released, we got one step closer to the arcade experience, but we still weren't fully there. Arcade businesses were at a slump in the early 90s, though as a kid, I wouldn't have known. There was a local pizzeria that always hosted 2 or 3 arcade games and would rotate them every now and then. There were always a few kids playing the latest games there whenever the owners would switch them up. Games like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Afterburner were a mainstay at that pizzeria. Until one day, they brought in an arcade game called Street Fighter II. Everything changed. A cousin of mine said that there's this game he wants to show me and I should grab a quarter if I can find one, so that we can play it and try it out. When we got to the arcade, he showed me Street Fighter II for the first time. He said, all the fights are 2 wins to a victory, and they're all hard guys. A hard guy to me back in the day was a character that was either at the end of a level or someone who took a few extra hits to beat up, because most of the games back then were featured characters where in just 1 or 2 hits you can do away with them. But in this game, everyone was on an equal playing ground as you. Now, him and I had never heard of the original Street Fighter back then. We never even played the original Street Fighter, let alone heard of it. But this was special. He picked Ken and won a few rounds before eventually losing after the car bonus stage. He told me that the game gets a bit harder after the bonus stage, which was true. I popped in a quarter and then proceeded to be overwhelmed by not only the buttons that were displayed in front of me, but by the game itself, and I pretty much had my butt handed to me. It was a pretty quick and pretty fierce defeat. Something else happened that day though. I became hooked. I would do anything to find another quarter just to try to play again and get a little better. But it wasn't just me. Crowds would huddle around the machine just to get another round and play. Not long after that, the pizzeria where we would play these games picked up an upgraded version of the game called Street Fighter II Champion Edition. This was huge. Now you can play as the boss characters. Awesome. To be honest, the game seemed a bit intimidating, and I stayed practicing on the original Street Fighter II a bit longer. What helped was that the owner would give you 2 credits per quarter on the older machine, while you only got 1 credit per quarter to play the Champion Edition version. Finally, when I got around to playing Champion Edition, I started to realize what Street Fighter II was becoming. It was becoming not only one of my favorite games to play, but one of the best games of all time. Arcades were always busy with this game. 2-player matchups would happen that at times would have you thrilled over victory, or really upset at defeat. It was just a series that was growing into something I loved. Though this may not be true, at the time I heard that Super Nintendo was going to be released with 6 buttons for the sole purpose of being able to play Street Fighter II at home. I didn't have a Genesis yet, but was actually considering getting a Nintendo console for the first time for the sole purpose of playing Street Fighter at home. Luckily, a friend of mine picked up the Super Nintendo version of Street Fighter 2 and invited me over to play. What I saw when the Super Nintendo booted up was awesome. It may have had inferior graphics, sound, and lacked the arcade's intro, but it gave us an opportunity to play as much Street Fighter as we wanted without having to pump a machine full of quarters. After I left my friend's home, I realized something important. I did not want the Super Nintendo version of Street Fighter 2. By that time, I much preferred Champion Edition, and the lack of boss characters was enough for me to grow patient and wait for the next iteration. That, along with the fact that I absolutely hated the Super Nintendo sound and intro for Street Fighter. Am I alone in that opinion? Let me explain. In Street Fighter 2 for the Super Nintendo, I also found that there was something odd with the sound. For example, when a character lost a match in the arcade, you'd hear this.
You win.
But in the Super Nintendo, you'd hear this. Why would the sound be changed to an echoey version of the lose yell? I never got that, but I didn't like it. Also, when a character punched or kicked, the sound effect used was just garbage in my opinion. A lot of people said that Super Nintendo sound chip was amazing, but to me, I couldn't stand it. Almost every game's sound effects all were the same. And unfortunately, Street Fighter 2 was a victim of this same problem. The voiceovers were fine. I didn't have a problem with those. Eventually, I heard that Champion Edition was coming to home consoles for both Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo. But then Nintendo stepped it up a notch and got Hyper Fighting along with Champion Edition in one cartridge. Not wanting to be outdone, Sega released their Special Champion Edition that also included Hyper Fighting in their one cartridge as well. However, Sega had one more trick up its sleeve. Sega's version was released 1 month earlier than Super Nintendo's version to get ahead of their competition, and they also included the full Street Fighter intro from the arcade. Sega knew how to do things the right way. Granted, it was developed by Capcom, not Sega, but at the time I was pretty sure Sega wanted the best version for their system. Sega also had one more advantage over the Super Nintendo version. Due to Sega processors being twice as fast as that of the Super Nintendo, Sega allowed you to turn up Hyper Fighting speed up to 10 times the normal playing speed. The SNES did not let you go that fast. Not that it made any sense playing that fast, but at least it was possible. Now I know the Sega Genesis gets criticized for not having the same quality sound as the Super Nintendo version. However, I have learned to love the Genesis version a lot more than the Super Nintendo version. Here's why. The player losing yell actually is closer to the arcade sound. Second, the music just sounds right to me. The Super Nintendo music, again, just sounded like every other Nintendo game, which is why I didn't like it.
Round 1, fight! Hadouken! Hadouken! Hadouken!
And yes, even though the voices sound like they're underwater, or at least very scratchy, after playing it over some time, I felt that at least they were faithful to the arcade. I loved it. Now the arcade had a problem. Since everyone had these games at home, why would anyone need to go to the arcade? Well, Capcom decided to put out another Street Fighter 2, calling it Super Street Fighter 2: The New Challengers. At this point I was asking, is this supposed to be Street Fighter 3? Nope, it's another Street Fighter 2. Same story, but new moves and new characters and sound. Holy moly, I had to relearn this game all over again, but at the same time, I was really good at it. It was awesome. I was able to finish the game pretty quickly, but couldn't stop wanting to play more and play against others. Home console versions followed suit, and I played both, once again favoring the Genesis for its arcade-accurate intro and its non-Nintendo music and sound. I was even able to borrow the game from a friend and play it at home for hours on end, trying to get better and seeing all the endings. Eventually, the excitement for Street Fighter died down, especially as players that were once eagerly anticipating a true Street Fighter 3 were now starting to move on to 3D gaming at home, because Capcom took way too long to finally release a sequel. By the time they did, after numerous spin-offs, the excitement already died down and arcades were not what they used to be. I also got older. Sure, I would occasionally play the game every now and then whenever I had spare time, but I was done. Or was I? Over the years, Capcom would release a number of anniversary collections or re-releases to the game that had me excited to jump back in and test my old skills. One of those collections was none other than Street Fighter II Anniversary Collection for the original Xbox and PlayStation 2 systems. This disc not only included Street Fighter III Third Strike, but also included a unique version of Street Fighter II called Hyper Street Fighter II, which was amazing to me. It let you play as any character from any version of Street Fighter II. Also, the reason I picked up the Xbox version after the PlayStation 2 version was that Xbox version let you play anyone on Xbox Live. For the first time, I could fight people online to see how good I really was. And it turns out, I was pretty damn good. I thought people playing online over the internet all day every day would destroy me. But in fact, I didn't do too bad at all. I stood a fighting chance, which was fun. Again, time passed and I grew older. Yet whenever I found some spare time, I would do a quick pickup game before on to my next adult task. Street Fighter II Champion Edition was usually not too far away. Those of you who are not new to my channel know that I absolutely adore the Shenmue franchise for its story and gameplay, but when I needed to play a quick game in my busy life, there's no game like Street Fighter. Its moves, characters, quick fights, and polish make it an incredible series for me. Yes, the sequels are all good as well, but none of them have ever really captured the magic as much as the Street Fighter II games. Capcom knows this is the case for many, as they have repeatedly released the games on more consoles, the latest being the 20th anniversary edition of all the 2D fighting games. Of course, I picked it up right away. The reason that this game has lasted so many years for me, and so many years for others, is simply its incredible deep gameplay, revolutionary fighting system, and timeless fight outcome possibilities. But the biggest reason it lasts so long is that it revolutionized the fighting genre. It revitalized arcades, and it was the true king of fighters, where everyone else was trying to catch up. So many millions of players absolutely adored the game, and it was so successful. The series even became a household name. So after 30 years, Street Fighter II has become a nostalgic hit that continues to generate profit for Capcom. So when players like myself jump back in, we don't just love it because it's so good. We love it because it brings us back to that time when we were popping in quarters and enjoying the amazing gameplay of Street Fighter II. If you have that version of Capcom's latest fighting compilation of Street Fighter from the original Street Fighter to Street Fighter 3 Third Strike on Steam, I have it too. My tag is Magnus 547, so if we catch each other on that, let's go around. See how well you do. That's my video for today. Let me know what you guys think, and as always, you can like, share, and make my day if you subscribe today. This is Magnus, and I'm out. Got more gaming videos coming up, and don't forget, I've also got Shenmue gameplay on my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/personalmagnus. As always, total pleasure. See you guys later.